Hey, what's up guys? Sean here. So today we are going to do something that a lot of people have been requesting. Today we are going to make my favorite beef jerky recipe. So you guys have been asking for this for a while, and I kind of been putting it off. Today we're going to do it. Let's get it. Okay, so to start with, we're going to start with our liquid ingredients because we're going to have to add some brown sugar to that and kind of get that brown sugar melting down just a little bit. So in this cup back here, I have about a quarter cup of water. And in my measuring cup here, I've got about almost a quarter cup of soy sauce. I'm going to add 3 tablespoons of Worcestershire sauce. And then, because I like it to taste a little smoky, I'm going to add a few drops of liquid. Woo, that's a lot. A little bit of liquid smoke. That's a little more than I wanted, but that's okay. We're going to go ahead and get this back here and get it started heating up. Let's see. Now, as soon as that starts to heat up, we're going to add a quarter cup of brown sugar. Okay, so I misspoke. What we're going to be adding to this is actually an 1/8 cup, 2 tablespoons of brown sugar. And we'll let that get to dissolving down. And while that's dissolving down, we're going to get our meat cut up, and then we'll add everything else in. Wow, the flies are horrible out here today, and I can't run my fan because of the audio, so we'll just have to keep swatting flies, unfortunately. So what we've got here is about a 2.5 pound eye round. First thing we're going to do is try to get rid of all this fat. Now, I know fat is flavor, right? That's what everybody says, fat is flavor. On your beef jerky, fat is foul. So if you leave fat on your beef jerky, you are literally going to spoil your beef jerky. So we got to get all this fat off of here. And you want to save as much meat as you can, so get the fat off of there, but don't waste a bunch of meat. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and cut this thing in half because I want to have smaller pieces. Plus, we're going to do a little something different to one of the halves that I haven't tried yet. So I want to have 2 different flavors this time. When you're cutting your beef jerky, if you cut along the grain this way, your beef jerky is going to be long and stringy and tough to eat. If you cut directly across it, it's going to crumble all up on you. So I always say cut it on the bias. Cut it on a 45 across the grain. That will give you a little bit of chew, but it'll also break up, make it a little easier. You want to cut these slices a 1/4 inch thick or a little less than a 1/4 inch thick, because when they dry out, they're going to shrink up. So if you cut them about a 1/4 inch thick, they're going to end up roughly an 1/8 inch thick when they dry out. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this big chunk across the 45. And then I'll start here on either side cutting my slices out. Now, something I should have said first off is you want your meat frozen when you are going to cut your slices out of it. Mine was. But through the process of getting everything together and getting everything out here, I took my meat out a little early, and therefore I'm struggling to get my meat cut in thin enough slices. So that's something that you need to remember. If you cut your meat when it's frozen, you can get good thin slices. If you wait until it's thawed out, then it's going to be tougher to slice. So that's just something to think about. My mistake, but I'm in it now. So we're just going to go ahead and go with it. Everything will be fine. It'll just take a little longer for it to dehydrate, and the pieces will be a little bit thicker. We'll just have to make sure they're good and dry. So that'll be fine. We'll make it work. The one thing you can do, if your meat thaws out, you can lay it down on its side and cut it across the table, and that makes it a little bit easier to cut that way. Okay, so the dry ingredients are fairly simple. So we needed 1 teaspoon of garlic powder. We needed 1 teaspoon of onion powder. It calls for 2 teaspoons of salt. I prefer to use celery salt. The reason for that is celery salt has natural nitrates in it. And I know nitrates, some of you are against nitrates, so use whatever salt you want. The celery salt in your beef jerky makes it a little more shelf stable and not needing to be refrigerated. So, which is the point of beef jerky to me. So I've got 2 tablespoons of celery salt here. Now it calls for 1 teaspoon of black pepper. I like coarse black pepper, but I also use a little more than a teaspoon. And so I told you we were going to do a couple different things. So I'm going to do one that's just the black pepper, and then I got some more of the Meat Church's seasoning. This time I've got the Gospel. If you remember the other one, I got Holy Voodoo. This is the Gospel. This is more of a barbecue flavor. So this will be salty. We're going to have to kind of play it by ear on that. But I think we're going to be okay. And I think this will be really good on one of the jerky. So we're going to do half without and then half with the Gospel on it, and just try it out, see how it tastes. So now we've got our meat cut up. One thing I was going to tell you that you can do if your meat cuts up too thick, you can take a slab that's pretty thick and lay it out on a piece of parchment paper or a cutting board or whatever, and you can take a rolling pin or a meat mallet and roll that thing out or mash that thing out, and it will actually make it thinner, and it'll actually make it a little more tender if that's what you're looking for. So may end up having to do that with some of these pieces that came out a little bit too thick, but that's okay. So I've got 2 of these Ziploc bags, and the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to put roughly, just eyeballing it, about half the seasoning from each in each bag. Just eyeballing it. It'll be okay. Yeah, that was a little more. I'll have to add some to that. So we're going to go with the pepper. There we go. So now I've got that. I've got my liquid ingredients up here. And I'm going to take about half of this and pour in the bag. About like that. I'm going to close this bag up. Make sure it's closed. And I'm going to mix all this up. Just like that. Now, we're going to add our beef jerky to be our meat into these bags. And we're going to let these things marinate for 6, 8, 10, 12 hours. Somewhere like that in the refrigerator. Now, one thing I like to do is leave just a little gap open at the edge of this bag and push all the air out of that bag and then seal it up. Alright, so now we got them all ready to go. It's time to go throw them in the refrigerator and let them marinate. Alright, we're back. Today is day number 2. As you can see, our marinade has worked. Our meat is all darkened up and marinated, so should be really good. So, thing is, I put this in the refrigerator about 7 o'clock last night, I think. And had to do some work this morning, so I didn't get everything started first thing this morning. So it's about lunchtime now, and so this has been marinating for 16, 17 hours, so that's kind of a long time, but that's fine. It'll be completely fine. So now our next step is we actually have to take this meat out of here, take a paper towel, and blot this meat down and dry it off as much as we can. And then we are going to take my wife's rolling pin. Don't tell her that I took it. But we're going to take this rolling pin and we're going to mash out some of this meat that's a little bit thick. And we'll roll it all out and see if we can't get it to a little bit better thickness for what we're going to need. We may end up having to cut some of those slices down a little bit smaller because they did end up pretty big. And after we mash them down or roll them out, they'll be a little bit bigger. So, but our next step is going to be to go ahead and we're going to do one bag at a time so we don't get them mixed up. This is our barbecued seasoning, and then this is just the pepper. So we'll set this one off to the side for now, and we'll start out with our barbecue seasoned. So I'm going to just take this out a few pieces at a time, and something like that. That's already thin enough. I won't worry about that. Same there. These smaller pieces will probably be just fine. So we'll just take some of these out and dry them off good, and we can go ahead and get them on the rack. Some of these pieces like this, they're going to take some rolling because that did come out pretty thick. So I'm hoping I can get these rolled out thin enough. I think I can. So it's actually a pretty simple process to make beef jerky, but it's a time commitment now. It's not a go in the kitchen, throw everything together, and you got beef jerky tomorrow morning. Now, I guess you probably could do that if you weren't going to marinate it for very long, but I wanted the seasoning marinated into my meat, so I wanted it to marinate for a little bit longer. Maybe not quite as long as I ended up with, but that's okay. So we're just going to blot this. Try to get it as dry as we can. We'll flip them over. Do the same thing. Now remember, you're not really losing a bunch of your flavor here because your flavor is marinated into the meat. So this is just the outside stuff, and if you don't blot it down and dry it, then it will take forever to dry out. So that's why we're doing this. And it'll take a handful of paper towels now. Have paper towels on hand and be ready for that, because it's going to take quite a few of them. Alright, now we'll take some of the thinner ones. We're going to go ahead and put them on the rack. Now, when you are putting your jerky on the rack, when you're putting your meat on the rack, don't overlap it. Make sure it has a little bit of space in between it. Obviously, makes sense, right? But you want to make sure you are using up as much space as you can, but you don't want everything touching, because if it's touching, it's not drying. So we'll get the ones on here that we can get on here. Go on, flies, without rolling them. And then we'll roll the others. I think that one's okay. Alright, let's roll these other ones out. So, we're going to take this rolling pin, just kind of wipe it up, just make sure it's clean. Well, let's go ahead and throw these off to the side so we can roll one at a time and try to get a really good roll on it. So as you can see, this one is pretty doggone thick right here. Let's see if we can roll it and mash it out a little bit. A hammer, a mallet would do a better job of this, but I don't have a meat mallet, and my ball peen hammer's got grease on it from working on the Jeep, so I don't want to use that either. Well, that's a little better. It's a little thinner. I would definitely recommend, if you're going to do this, if you have to do this, get yourself a meat mallet. Do it with a meat mallet. That's going to be a quicker process. Now, like I was saying, I'm going to cut this into 2 strips. That way it'll make it dehydrate a little bit more evenly. These pieces are definitely a little thicker than I wanted, but it's what I got. I think it'll be okay. Okay, so we've got one of these made up already. So this is the barbecue one. What I'll do just before we put these on the dehydrator and get them started, I'm going to sprinkle some of the gospel on top of it, and then it will dehydrate in. And then on the pepper side, I will sprinkle some pepper on top of it and make sure it dehydrates in too. So that should be really good. But we got these all set up now and ready to go. As soon as I get everything else done, we'll throw them on the dehydrator, and then I'll get back to you then. I know I said I was going to have to be real careful with this one for the salt, but in all honesty, this doesn't have a whole ton of sodium in it, and it actually is pretty sweet, so I'm not going to overpower this beef jerky with this. Alright guys, so we got the dehydrator all loaded up. So what we have here is a Presto 6300 or 06300, I believe. I will leave a link in the description if you're interested in one of these. It's a 600 watt dehydrator, super simple. You don't have any control over it whatsoever. You put your meat in here, you turn the thing on, and let it go. I'll let this dehydrate for 12 hours or so, and then I'll check it. Some of this meat's pretty thick. I may have to let it go a little longer. But you'll notice when it's dehydrating, sometimes it will have a little bit of a sheen to it, like it looks like it's a little damp. Let it go. So if it looks like it's a little damp still, let it go a little longer. You want it to be good and dry when you break it open. So obviously like beef jerky. Not telling you anything you don't already know, right? So I'll let this go for about 12 hours, and then we'll check it. But I will leave a link in the description for this thing, because I know people are going to ask me about it. Now, let's talk about money real quick. This dehydrator costs $66 or something like that on Amazon. This beef, the eye round was 2.5 pounds that I bought for this thing. It was about $12. By the time it dehydrates all out, I'll probably have a pound, maybe a little over a pound, pound and a quarter maybe, of beef jerky. So, is it worth it to make your own beef jerky? Well, in this one, let's say, pound of beef jerky, I think at Walmart, the cheaper stuff, a pound or a half pound, 8 ounces of beef jerky, if I'm not mistaken, is about $10 or $12. So you figure there's $24 roughly of beef jerky here after it's done. I know exactly what went into it. So if you make beef jerky a couple times, you've made your money back on it, and then you are into saving yourself a lot of money then when you make beef jerky from then on out. So especially if you do a lot of trips and adventures like we do, it definitely is worth it to make your own beef jerky. The problem is, after it's done, you have to make sure you stay out of it until you have an adventure, and that's a tough one. So we're going to get this thing cranking and let this thing dehydrate, and then we'll come back when it's all done. I don't know if you can see it or not, but some of them still have a little sheen on them, just a little bit left. We're almost there though. Alright, so it has been a long day, guys. I'm sorry. So just got off work, got up early this morning and shut this thing down. So the beef jerky ended up running roughly about 14 hours or so. Those thicker pieces it took a little longer for those thicker pieces to dehydrate. But I'm gonna go ahead and open this thing up, let you take a look at it, and then it actually worked out pretty good. So let's open this thing up and I'll let you take a look at it. All right, let's see. Looks pretty good. I'm not gonna lie to you, I have already tasted this beef jerky and got some surprises. So this barbecued flavor, the gospel that I used on here, I could have used a ton more in the seasoning. It doesn't have a lot of sodium in it. So this is actually very mild. It does have the barbecue seasoning to it, but it's very, very mild. So it is barbecue seasoning. You can taste it. But if you look close, you can see it's dry, like beef jerky. Maybe a little drier than I should have let it go, but it was so tough I had to get the thickest pieces to dehydrate. So like this one right here, this is one of the really thick pieces right there, and you can see it is 1/8 of an inch or so, and it is dry. So may have went a little long on it, but that's okay. It's dried out now. Beef jerky is beef jerky, so it's delicious no matter what, in my opinion. But let's go ahead and we'll kind of take this stuff out of there, and I'll let you kind of see what it looks like, and then we're going to bag it up and weigh it and see how it does. Still pretty good. Now, I'm just going to bag it and put it all in one bag. It's going to be me eating it or Sarah, so we like both flavors. It's not going to make that big a difference. Got some little niblets for the dogs. That's just the barbecue right there. That's just the barbecue. Now the peppered. See, this peppered had some really thick pieces too. But as you can see, they dried out no problem. So I'm really happy to see that, because I was kind of worried about some of the really thick pieces. Need a bigger bag. I thought I was going to be able to get it all in a pint bag, but I don't think I am. Yeah, not going to be able to zip it up. That's a good hefty little bag of beef jerky there now. Alright, so I'm really excited about how much beef jerky we ended up with. So I started off with like 2.5 pound eye round. So that's a good start for me, like for a couple small trips or something like that. This is plenty for a couple small trips, especially if I can stay out of it before the trip, which is kind of tough. But got a pretty cool trip planned coming up, and so I'm going to try to stay out of it for that trip. But I want to weigh this thing out and see how much we ended up with. So I've got Sarah's little scale here, and let's weigh this thing up and see how much we ended up with. Okay, I got this thing zeroed out. So I think that's 1 pound and almost 3 ounces. So I'm pretty happy with that. That is not bad for a little bit of work. So I'm really happy with this. 1 pound, almost 3 ounces of beef jerky here. And it worked out really, really well. So we'll enjoy this beef jerky on an upcoming adventure. Now, I wanted to tell you something. You do not have to have a dehydrator. So you can set your oven on the lowest setting that it'll set at. The lowest setting. And you can put your meat on a rack inside there. Probably be a good idea to put a baking sheet or something under it to catch any dripping, so it just doesn't dirty up your oven. But you can do it in your oven at home. Or if you want to be adventurous about it, you could bushcraft a tripod and make a rack to go in there, build you a little fire under it, and wrap that thing with some canvas and make you a little smoker. That'd be pretty fun in a camp one day. We may actually have to try to do that. I had several people asking me over and over about the beef jerky. So I have made some Instagram posts about making the beef jerky, and I just had a lot of people, or several people, asking about it. So there you go. So I will leave an actual recipe roughly of what I did in the description, and you guys can go there if you want and kind of recreate this, or you can kind of play around with it with your own flavors and make your own beef jerky. It's a lot of fun. It's very rewarding, because at the end of the day, now I got this big bag of beef jerky. So if you go out there and you make your own beef jerky, leave me a comment and let me know how it turned out. I'm really interested to know how your beef jerky turns out. If you like this video, give it that big thumbs up. If you haven't already, consider hitting that subscribe button. I'd really appreciate it. Ring the notification bell so you'll get notified next time we put out a video. We got that adventure meal series coming up. That should be pretty fun. We're going to test out new recipes for camping, maybe some campfire cooking recipes. We're going to dehydrate our own adventure meals, and then we're going to go out and test some of the freeze-dried meals, different flavors and stuff that you can get from the big box store, stuff like that. And we're going to actually bundle them up into daily meals or breakfast meals, lunch, dinner kind of thing. So I'll kind of take you through that whole thing and show you. So it should be a lot of fun. Keep an eye out for that coming up. It'll be a new series. So I really appreciate you guys sticking in there with me today. Make your own beef jerky. Leave me a comment. Let me know how it went. And I really appreciate you guys watching. See you next week.